Hi, welcome to Ontario Culture Days, sponsored by Brampton Library System. I'm Pratap Reddy. I'd like to describe myself as an underwriter by day and a writer by night. You shouldn't be surprised that a writer needs to have a day job. Otherwise, we'll not be able to place food on the table for our families. Having said that, I've written two books. One, a collection of stories called Weather Permitting, and a novel called Ramya's Treasure. I have another collection which has been put together and is awaiting publication. I've written, or I'm in the process of writing another novel. I'm halfway through it. You might wonder, what has all this to do with poetry? Or for that matter, poets, unwilling or otherwise. For this, I have to go back many years. I emigrated to Canada from India in 2002 with a burning desire to become a writer. I didn't know how to go about doing it. I cast around, I talked to friends, and started writing stories right away. First time lucky, my story was published in a glossy South Asian magazine called Anoki. But I had not come all the way to Canada to have my stories published in South Asian magazines. So I tried sending my stories to various literary magazines and all kinds of places. But not one story was published. There was not even an acknowledgement. So it made me very desperate. I started consulting friends, and whomever I met, I spoke about my predicament. One of them suggested that there are open mics. Why don't I go and read my stories at one such event? Mississauga Arts Council was hosting an open mic at Second Cup in Square One. So I called Mississauga Arts Council. But the person on the line said, open mics are not for reading prose. Poets, songwriters, singers, musicians, all kinds of people perform there, but rarely has a person reading prose. And then she came up with this idea, why don't you write a poem? It was Friday afternoon and the open mic was on Sunday evening. Is it possible that one could become a poet because one wishes so? Nonetheless, I put my thinking cap on and then put together a poem. Convinced that a poem need not rhyme, it need not be in iambic pentameter or a quatrain or an Alexandrine quartet or anything like that which I had read about in our college and school. And then I came up with this poem. I'll read from it. My very first poem. It's called Second Thoughts in Second Cup. What am I doing here? What a foul mix-up. Having second thoughts in second cup. What delusion, what unforgivable presumption for a writer of serious and no-nonsense fiction. For one who pens long-winded tales of immigrants and their travails, their agonies and their angst, their ecstasies and their existential pangs, to meet and mix with poets and versifiers, to break bread with banjo players and balladeers, share the stage with stand-up comics and sitcom writers, all those whose muses happily roam the Tin Pan Alley. Alas, my patron saint is Gutenberg of the printer's galley. Open the mic, close the book, and look no further. Hear wordsmiths of every hue and color foregather. When spoken words fulminate, hiss and roar, where unspoken thoughts sprout wings and soar, poets unleash nimble-footed iambs and pentameters. Teary voiced some sing of love, strumming their zithers. The medieval charms of times New Roman and Ariel disappear in the face of spoken words, ancient sex appeal. What do I call this piece, this chapbook of unprinted pages, this procession of felicitous words, this kaleidoscope of verbal images, this karaoke of my interior monologues, this parody of my personal weblogs? A poem it isn't. It has no true rhyme or reason, nor a song accompanied by strings and percussion. Sometimes prosaic poetry, sometimes poetic prose. No thoroughbred, it's misbegotten and gross. The ancient Greeks, in their learned way, called some similar stuff an apostrophe. Yours truly, a poet Mankey, calls his spoken word effort a catastrophe. Well, I had read this poem, and the aftermath was that for all these months I was looking to have something I had written published. Mississauga Arts Council thought it fit to have this published in their newsletter, and I was so thrilled to see it in black and white. And then I continued to write these poems off and on, and one thing led to another, and Mississauga Arts Council wanted to know whether I would submit my work for their annual event. They are called Marty Awards for an Emerging Writers Prize. So I did, and that particular year, within few months of reading my first poem, I got the prize. And I'm very pleased to say that the jury was impressed. Of course, I had submitted my short stories about immigrant experience. They were impressed by it, and I beat contestants who had even books published. So that was my first attempt at writing poetry and its result. I would like to read from another poem of mine, written for such open mics, of course. It's called Word for Word. The world of spoken word is so alluring. The words so apt, so short, so telling. The printed word's legacy is another thing. We like words with a long and resonant ring. I am the beginning and I am the end, the Lord said. Both simple and profound, that we are all impressed. But a scribe would have said without a moment's hesitation, I am the commencement and I am the culmination. The world is becoming smaller. We call it globalization. Hollywood films are shown all over. That's Coca-Colaization. Things are hard to understand. It's certainly obfuscation. Make it nice and easy, boy, it's oversimplification. Some politicians were thrown out of the window in the city of Prague a couple of centuries ago. Wouldn't we love to do the same thing in TO? And the historians called it defenestration, Rain, sleet or snow are reduced to precipitation. Air is atmosphere and sunshine is solar radiation. Fire in a writer's hand becomes a conflagration. For water, wonderful water, there's been no other appellation. No matter what we drink, coffee, tea or beverage, no matter what we drink, coffee, tea or coke, they are called beverage in one master stroke. How hungrily we find words for food, any wonder? Nutrition, nourishment, victuals and provender. The moment of our birth is called parturition. Breathing is respiration, sweating is perspiration. When we marry, we are united in matrimony. When we part, we divorce, no doubt with acrimony. Your pay, grandly called remuneration, is but a pittance. Soon you'll be sacked with a pink slip and severance. When you die, the final moment is called a bereavement. More so if you have left nothing in your will and testament. When you pass water, it's called micturation. When you get onto the pot, that I will not mention. The F word that rhymes with luck is called copulation. A bit of fun on the side, and what you have is fornication. It's time for me to wind up or terminate, should I say. Everything comes to an end, and what do you think of my display? I can see by your faces what bullshit is your judgment. It's not bullshit, sir, I say, it's bovine excrement. Well, this is not a serious poem at all. Not like the poems I read. My favorite poet was W.H. Auden, and I admired the works of Robert Frost. Nevertheless, this poem got very, when I read it out in an open mic, it got very good reception. People gave a very good adulation, and they, as I stepped out and walked away, they congratulated me and waved their. I will read from another poem. I came from a tropical country, India, where the coldest thing we knew was the ice in the freezer of the refrigerator. But here in Canada, ice and snow is a common phenomenon in winter, and temperatures plummet to even 30 degrees minus. Is it a surprise that I have written a poem about Canadian snow? It's called Pink Snow. That year, winter lingered well into May, with snow clinging to rooftops and overstaying on sidewalks. The park was cold and unsmiling, birds refusing to sing. The naked trees closed ranks, trembling in the wind. The rumpled and grey sky overhead like an unwashed hoodie, and the ground soft and sodden with last night's needle-sharp rain. When the train turned, all of a sudden, blindsiding me, I saw a mystical vision. Drift upon drift of pink snow. Two gaunt cherry trees standing on a rise had shed all their flowers to make an eiderdown of petals to warm the shivering earth. When I read this poem at a poetry club, people thought or called it a nature poem. I beg to differ. I thought it was a poem on sacrifice. There was another occasion for which I wrote a poem. It's called Okan Konchner, Discovering an Artist in Gothenburg. The requirement was that I write about a painting or a painter, so this is what I came up with. Spring was everywhere, on the streets and in the parks, even at the museum, even in my walk. Winter, that clinging, persistent lover, hangs around in the Kattegat Sound, waving her frozen hand at every chance. The Furstenberg Gallery had hung artists, nailing them to the wall, punishing them for daring to bring beauty into our lives. Sumptuous bodies fleshed out by Rubens, and the great Rembrandt at pains to paint himself over and over again. Impressionist images drenched in sun, and Surtsey seas burned in Turner's vision. When I went to the Louvre, I found Jackson Pollock too. What caught my eye was this local guy, amazingly versatile, Swedish to the core. Okan Konchner, the name he wore. He filled the place with canvases galore, still life, landscape, abstract and more. Who was this man I had never heard of before? A master, it appears, of every school I know. When my cousin turned up in his true blue Volvo, I gushed about this Scandinavian maestro. Okan Konchner, my cousin said, you muttonhead, is Swedish for unknown artist, he said. Well, that was a poem, and editor of a small poetry magazine was present in the audience, and then he invited me to have this poem sent to him so that he could publish. And that's how, for the first time, a poem of mine was published in a poetry magazine. And coming to The last poem I'd like to read. The poem is about two things that are very common in a writer's life. The first one is a writer's block, which plagues any writer again and again. And another aspect about this poem is that it features CN Tower, an icon of Toronto, a beacon which every immigrant sees and recognizes. I had heard about the CN Tower, then the tallest freestanding structure in the world, way back in the 80s when I was living in when I was living in India. I'd like to read from this poem, Writer's Block. Chipping away at the dense, immense mass in my head fruitlessly, the characters refuse to come to life. Dead dialogue congeals in their mouths. I lay down my tools, sitting idle. I while away the empty hours, staring out of my high-rise window. In the distance, slumming with Lake Ontario, is Toronto. It's late in the evening. The Canadian National Tower looks like an upright python that has swallowed up a flying saucer. When it's night, a gulf of darkness separates us, but the ground is a throw of black satin and with sequins. Some gold, some silver, some red, many flowing in endless processions like regimented glowworms. In the fall, the autumnal colors singe the city. A frozen forest fire, it looks. The tower stands tall, basking in the lucid light of day, unmindful of the reminders from the lake about winter skulking around the corner. When winter arrives, the landscape becomes a sepia print of dull brown houses and dirty snow. A few firs, refusing to go with the flow, stand out like exclamation marks. The tower, shivering behind a veil of haze, disappears and reappears whimsically. The lifeless lake has become one with the sky. Is there a sharp chisel or a sharper pencil or some other magical utensil? My matchless wit perhaps, or my lively imagination that will galvanize the cadavers of my fiction. But tonight, the long, lonely, barren vigil has come to an end. Behold, the first fingers of light are applying color, pink and purple and gold, to the underbellies of the clouds. The urgent pre-dawn chidings of birds float up to my window like radio static of a program that could well be Good Morning Canada. The stars, turning their backs on the newborn day, look so lovely in the final throes of the night. The sun rises, a vermilion dog on the forehead of the sky, forming a glorious halo behind the tower, casting benediction upon this earth. In the dark crypt of creativity, a tiny spark flutters, slowly growing into a flaming torch. My votive for the begrudging muses, the mellow light shines in every benighted recess of my mind, and then I hear a sound, then I see and sense a movement. My creatures are beginning to stir, and my hopeful, trembling hand reaches for my computer in that resplendent hour. Sharp as a stylus, the CN Tower is writing a prayer in the sky. I stop here. I thank you for your patience in listening to hearing me out. I also thank the Brampton Library System for giving me this opportunity to present my poetry. Thank you once again and goodbye. ఒకటే ప్లేస్లో ఉందాం.